Good morning, everybody. Good morning to all our customers and all our partners, and a huge welcome from Tanium and Exclusive Networks to this morning's webinar. Thank you for joining. I'm delighted to be hosting this morning's session. My name's Darren Barker. I manage our mid-enterprise and our emerging markets across EMEA at Tanium. And I can't tell you how brilliant it is to be back in the Middle East region with so many customers and so many partners this morning. Joining me this morning is somebody many of you I know will know very well. I'm delighted to quickly introduce my co-host this morning. My co-host is Grant Taylor, the General Manager for the Middle East at Exclusive Networks. Grant, can I pass across to you and ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, cool. So thanks, Darren, for the introduction, and salam alaikum to our attendees. As Darren said, I'm the General Manager for Saudi Arabia and the Director of Business Development across the Middle East here at Exclusive Networks. It's my responsibility to onboard and bring across new and exciting technologies. And we work with a number of fantastic vendors across the Middle East. But sometimes we launch solutions that really capture the imagination, and I believe have the capacity to make a huge impact in the region. And I hope by the end of the WebEx today, you guys feel the same. For me, Tanium represents a massive opportunity for all of us, whether we're the end user, the reseller, system integrator. It's a huge opportunity. And lastly, for me, we have the pleasure of announcing the winners of our staycations at the end of the presentation. So please stick around for that, although I'm sure you'll be so engrossed with the presentations that you won't be going anywhere anyway. Thanks very much.
Hey, Grant, thank you for that. And guys, what a fantastic agenda and amazing speakers we have lined up this morning. One piece of work really is any questions that you have this morning, please pop them into the Q&A and we will respond to every question. I'd like to respond to most of them in real time, but we will make sure that we respond to every question. So pop them in the Q&A, please. I'm going to walk through the agenda shortly, but firstly, let me introduce you to the great speakers we've got. The great speakers from both Tanium and our strategic partners today, Endpoint X and PwC. So kicking us off this morning is Ali Khan. Ali Khan is the Director of Cybersecurity at PwC, and he holds the excellent relationship that we have across the region between Tanium and PwC. We're also joined by Zach Warren from Tanium. Zach is Senior Director of Cybersecurity. Zach recently joined us, will give us a great perspective on the industry and the cybersecurity marketplace. Next, we're absolutely delighted that we've got our SVP for EMEA, Steve Murphy, joining us this morning. Steve absolutely adores this region. He's got 25 years experience of growing business across the Middle East. And I know for one that this is a huge priority for Stevie, making our Middle East business a success. This morning, Stevie will be talking to our quite amazing founder and CEO, Orion Hindawi. Now, due to some time zone challenges, Orion actually lives in Seattle, so it was Steve's decision that we didn't ask him to wake up in the middle of the night. So Stevie and Orion recorded a fantastic session, which we will run today, and Steve will be on hand live to answer questions and talk to us straight after that session. I'm also delighted that Scott Lowe and Joe Michael join us from our most experienced partner in EMEA, Endpoint X. So that's our speakers. Let me quickly move into to the agenda for today. In just a moment, Ali will start to share with us just how customers across the region are adopting and driving digital transformation initiatives. And the most important part of that is what that drives is in turn is cyber resilience and cyber security requirements. And PwC will talk to us about the approach and what they're seeing across the market today. Moving on to Zach. Zach will analyze the threats and the disruptions that we all see to our business today. More importantly, he will talk to us about how Tanium can help you meet these challenges and resolve those challenges in your business today. Then we'll move on to Stevie and Orion. Orion will share just how and why Tanium was created, a real insight. He'll also talk about the goals that he has for Tanium, and he'll give us a live demo, bringing simplicity and the power of Tanium to life. What about that? Our CEO is going to give us a live demo of Tanium. And finally, the Endpoint X team, they're going to talk to us a fantastic story about how they discovered Tanium whilst working in one of the large global banks. They found Tanium that amazing, and they will say this, not me, they left and started up a Tanium partner business. What a great story. Now, as many of you are, I'm aware that many of you are brand new to the Tanium brand. So I want to share with you my introduction to Tanium before we kick off the agenda. So next slide, please, Roland. So today we have both customers and partners on the line, and I want to share with you just why we're so excited, but we're also so confident that the Middle East is the next big market for our business. Together with exclusive networks, we're simply replicating what we've done across Europe together. We're replicating what Tanium has done across Americas and across Asia Pac, and that's together with partners, we win and provide solutions to the most demanding customers across the globe. That's cross-sector. That could be financial services, public sector departments, global retailers. It really is cross-sector. But equally as important, and really important to me, is our proven ability to address the needs not only of the big global organizations, but the mid-size, smaller organizations. They've got very few skills and very little scale to meet those challenges that exist today. But we see the same challenges in the big globals as we do with the smaller organizations. And those challenges, you know, the need for accurate information, the absolute need for a huge focus on IT hygiene to prevent those breaches, and one single view across your enterprise for security and for operations. So with 25 million endpoints already under management, together with you, we're ready to make the Middle East the next big market and solve those customer challenges. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Ali Khan, the Director of Cybersecurity at PwC. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Darren, and welcome everyone, and great to have you all here and attending the webinar overall. Folks, as part of this section, what I'd like to do is to provide an overview in terms of what the market and what we're currently seeing in the market from a cyber perspective, especially some of the large-scale sort of transformations in the region, and how cyber is really acting as an enabler. So if we can just go to the next slide, I just want to start off by providing a high-level overview in terms of what's happening in the region across the different GCC sort of countries overall. Basically, what we're embracing is massive transformation initiatives overall. When we talk about our markets in Saudi, there are major initiatives underway for smart city engagements, huge digitalization efforts that have been accelerated due to the pandemic. But in addition to that, obviously, as part of the growing economy that we're part of, we're seeing some massive transformations there as well. When we start to take a look at the second biggest market in the region, the UAE market, we're seeing some massive transformations around digital infrastructures. 2 weeks back, we saw the introduction of the privacy law that was introduced. And just this week, we've seen the personal protection privacy law that has been introduced in the KSA. And these transformations are continuing to drive the need for further enhanced solutions for our clients, for our region, and for overall for the overall transformation. Some of the other major initiatives, we're seeing some great growth in the Qatar market. That's obviously being driven through a number of initiatives, including upcoming sporting events and upcoming enhancements to the overall infrastructure of the country and so forth overall. And then similarly within countries such as Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain, major transformations all around digitalization and so forth. And what that basically means for us is that cyber continues to be an enabler for these transformations. We can no longer adopt digital technology without embracing the underlying security and secure configuration principles around that. And we have seen cases in the past where digital transformation initiatives may not have necessarily have cyber on top of their agenda, and there has been complexities in enabling and realizing the success of such initiatives and so forth overall. So with that being said, the region continues to emerge as an overall growing economy from a worldwide perspective. As a region, we have come out really well in terms of back on growth track post-pandemic. The results are obviously coming through as we monitor that quarter by quarter, and we are seeing some great results in terms of as a growing economy and the need for kind of growing our digitalization efforts in cybersecurity overall. If we move on to the next slide, Rolf, there are certain trends that are key here in terms of cyber growth, and I think it's important for us to kind of mention that and kind of understand some of these and how these are interrelated in the market overall. The first one obviously is around the large-scale digital transformations. These include major smart city engagements, major initiatives within oil and gas industry, major initiatives within government around digitalizing number of services, and so on and so forth overall. And with those efforts, the security risks that come with those need to obviously be managed, and so on and so forth. So that increases the need for cyber overall. Our region as a whole obviously has also experienced the remote workforce migrations, or being able to enable our people to be able to work remotely. That has caused organizations with an evolving threat landscape. Now there needs to be massive improvements and monitoring along to the endpoints, especially when those endpoints are away from corporate offices and so on and so forth overall. So that continues to increase and contribute to growth. Industry disruption by 2030, we have major visions in the region around being able to attain massive transformations and massive enhancements to different initiatives overall, and this disruption obviously needs to be managed from that perspective as well. Just 2 weeks back, we've seen the UAE introduce the privacy law, and this week we've seen KSA introduce a personal information and privacy enactment law as well. The increased privacy and regulatory scrutiny will continue to drive the need for cyber, and we'll continue to see this as our region continues to adopt these laws and so forth overall. We continue to work in the region. We continue to see the establishment of enhanced customer trust, making sure that customers for our clients continue to trust to share their data, make sure that their data is handled well, and obviously that continues to evolve from a growth perspective as well. And then one of the major transformations that we're experiencing and our region is adoption of cloud. There are massive initiatives underway where we have both multinational cloud organizations and local organizations that are adopting the infrastructures and building out local clouds in the region, and organizations are shifting to cloud due to the ease of management, due to the ease of operations, and so on and so forth overall. With the adoption of cloud, there comes massive opportunities around strengthening the security posture within environments for our clients, and so on and so forth. And we continue to see that in the region overall. And this is driving a lot of growth from an overall kind of cyber and a protection perspective overall. So these are some of the key trends that we're noticing and experiencing within the environment within our region overall. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'd like us to just probably give an overview around how we see the market and how big this roughly looks like. When we take a look at the overall market for cybersecurity, and we sort of structure this into services, the actual workforce that is in cyber, the hardware, software, infrastructure, and kind of look at that cumulatively overall. We're currently estimated that the overall market size within the GCC is estimated approximately around $5.2 billion USD this year. And it continues to grow at one of the highest growth rates in information technology currently at about 13%, which is expected to reach to 8.5 billion over the next 5 years, roughly speaking. Now this includes obviously professional services. It includes the workforce itself around cyber. It includes infrastructure, software, hardware, and support for those, for cyber overall. In terms of some of the biggest markets in the region, KSA continues to be the biggest market in terms of cybersecurity spend and in cybersecurity overall, followed by UAE at about 1.4. Then we have Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, and Bahrain. And obviously, when we take a look at some of the major shifts and some of the major initiatives, we're continuing to seeing growth in all of the 6 different GCC countries as a result of some of the transformation and some of the key trends that I talked about to us overall. Key segments and key industries that we're noticing growth in obviously continue to be the government sector, where there are massive initiatives to digitalize a number of different services across the region. Energy and utilities, massive initiatives over there around automation and around being able to adopt to initiatives such as the cloud and so forth, and so on. And then also banking and the financial services industry continues to drive key growth in the sector overall here. And then we have transportation and logistics, such as aviation, shipping, and so forth in the region overall, that is continuing to grow the market at this rate. We continue to see obviously shortage of good cybersecurity talent in the region as well, and that's obviously as a result of the demand and the supply. When we take a look at these numbers and try to take a look at what the overall workforce here looks like and so forth. So overall, it's a great story for us in the region. Cyber is going to continue to grow massively in the region, and we're going to continue to support and watch these transformations come to success over the coming years. Now, if you go to the next slide, just to maybe drill down on what are some of the challenges in terms of these cyber initiatives that are being taken, that are taking place. And I'd just like to go clockwise just to give us an overview in terms of what that entails. Obviously, third-party oversight continues to be a challenge that needs to be managed. The entire spectrum around the development of the startup ecosystem that we're seeing in the region, and the introduction of apps and managing untrusted apps and so on and so forth overall, that's key. Being resilient, or making sure that our businesses are resilient. So the pandemic has taught us a number of different things around how we would want to manage our business continuity and DRP plans going forward, but resiliency is key, a key theme that we're seeing in the region. Authentication and complexities around services where we're having federated models around authenticating our users for our clients and so on and so forth continues to be a growth area, and an area that we continue to see major initiatives coming in. Validation of inputs, protection of data. Looking at basic IT hygiene, so looking at the basics around documentation around rules for secure access around, for example, firewalls, proper asset management, asset inventory, and so on and so forth overall. Being able to detect anomalies within environments, so continuous monitoring programs, managed detection and response, and then looking at the overall environment culture and being able to adopt to that culture continues to be some of the major challenges that we look at. When we kind of look at all of these as a spectrum altogether, it basically boils down to one thing, and it's all around the risk mindset. It's all around making sure that us, in the region and our organizations are adopting that risk-first mindset when it comes to executing on these large-scale initiatives, and that cyber is a top priority as part of the agendas as we start to take a look at these activities. If we take a look at the next slide, this would be a high-level view in terms of some of the impacts in the region when it comes to cyber attacks, and we've come across a few publicly disclosed cyber attacks over the last year. And we've seen some of the implications of those, and so on and so forth overall. I'll just quickly break this down into the three major verticals here. So obviously, when it comes to being impacted from cyber attacks, we're looking at direct costs around investigation and remediation, where organizations are spending millions of dollars around being able to remediate. Regulatory sanctions, data breaches continue to account for about 4% of global revenue, and obviously, that becomes a portion of influence in the region as well. And customer business redress in terms of settlement agreements, breaches of privacy laws, and so on and so forth overall. Indirect costs to organizations as a result of cyber breaches include the increased insurance premiums for cyber insurance, customer frauds once data has been leaked, and class action lawsuits that are being seen. Intangible costs are obviously the damage to brand reputation, the loss of good talent from organizations, so top-level CISOs moving on, resigning, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, the risks around mergers and acquisitions. One of the biggest, obviously, mergers that we've seen in the past in the region continues to be the Careem acquisition with Uber, which has actually kickstarted a number of startup ecosystem in the region as well. And with the with attacks, that obviously diminishes some of those risks overall. Now, just to maybe at a high level, just to give you an overview in terms of closing this off, we go to the next slide. Just want to provide a high level overview in terms of where we are protecting and how we've been working very closely with our partners, Tanium, as their strategic consulting advisors in the region and globally as well in our history. We've had over 90 plus deployments overall, globally speaking. At PwC, we worked closely with our partners, Tanium, and deployed over 850 custom signals. These are very specific indicators that allow us to detect suspicious and anomalous activity within environments and so forth overall. Over 10 plus 8 APT intrusions we worked on. We've enriched a number of atomic indicators, continuing with our 3,000 plus strong cybersecurity professionals practicing overall. We've invested over 4 million plus in the alliance with Tanium at a global level. Overall, we're glad to be partners with Tanium in a number of different regions across the world. We've analyzed over 2 million endpoints, discovered over 150,000 unmanaged assets, and that's quite significant in terms of some of the risks that we've helped our organizations and our clients overcome. Over 145 trained practitioners, and we've been identified as the top cybersecurity consulting providers in the region for 6 years in a row with some of the independent research firms such as Forrester and so forth overall. So that kind of provides a high-level overview in terms of the market and in terms of what we're seeing in the region and what our history is with Tanium and our strong alliance in the region and globally overall. Hope that was helpful, folks. Darren, over to you.
Hey, Ali, thank you for that. What a great insight into what's happening across the region. I know what stuck out in my mind and will in my boss Steve is my 5.2 billion market opportunity, 13% growth year on year. There are not many markets that are growing that have come back that strongly. So brilliant. The organization's transforming, cloud initiatives driven by complexity, by regulation. There's a whole host of opportunity there. But Tanium as well as we know ourselves, I'd suggest, is one of our premier partners. Give me some insight in terms of, what are some of the use cases for using Tanium, particularly within those mid-size organizations, probably less than 500 employees?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Darren. And one of the biggest things that we come across when we start to work with clients in the region is obviously things around IT hygiene in particular. So looking at not having direct inventory or direct accounts of what clients have in terms of in terms of their inventory and assets overall. And this is obviously one of the biggest use cases that we see that could be that is being addressed through the asset discovery module within the Tanium product suite. MDR is the other capability set that I would add is there's some great initiatives within our clients around being able to develop some of the next gen and the high-end security operation centers. But once there is obviously events of interest identified, being able to remediate that and being able to take the right actions in due course of time. The MDR capability set is key over here for us to be able to look at, and as part of the modules within Tanium, we certainly feel that's one of the use cases that is certainly applicable there.
That's great.
And then lastly, around compliance, I think Darren is key. The Tanium Comply module is something that we would see that organizations could be able to adopt and start to look at their overall regulatory compliance frameworks as they start to take a look at some of these things.
Great, thanks for that insight, Ali. And as I say, you guys do know us better than we know ourselves, but what are the requirements if you move to the next logical step in executing a proof of concept? In terms of just try and give a flavor of, moving to that next step, we've identified the challenges. What are the requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about proof of concepts, we want to make sure that our clients are actually seeing these proof of concepts with their own data. And the way we want to work with clients in terms of executing these POCs is to have success-based proof of concepts definitions identified prior to executing the POCs. So obviously, We'd want to work with our clients to identify what those success factors look like, whether that includes MDR, compliance, discovery, so on and so forth overall. We'd then define the POC roadmap and execution roadmap. We'll work with our partners, yourselves, Tanium, and so on, to be able to then work at potentially standing up that POC environment within the client infrastructure. And then when we start to take a look at some of those success use cases, we'll work closely with the client, start to execute them and work on those. So it's a success-based POC approach. We want to make sure that clients can see Tanium and the overall solution set and the services in action with their own data to be able to look at some of the advantages and so forth overall.
Ali, wonderful. I want to say thank you again for sharing your approach and sharing your insight on the market. Thank you very much indeed. So guys,
Great.
Thank you. Before I move on, just one quick reminder. Any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box this morning. That will be great. And we will get to all those questions. Moving on, let me introduce our next speaker. I'm delighted that there's Zach Warren has joined us. Zach, Senior Director of Cybersecurity at Tanium. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Darren. So hello and good morning, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Zach Warren, and I'm the Senior Director of Cybersecurity Advisory at Tanium for EMEA. And I just actually started my journey with Tanium about 6 weeks ago. However, I've been utilizing Tanium for over 10 years in other organizations, and have been supporting large security teams by integrating Tanium into their security operations processes. So I'm definitely not new to the platform. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is IT organizations and the complexity that they have to deal with, and the growing complexity of their organizations. So next slide, please. So environments have just continued to grow year over year in scale and complexity, and device variety has just continued to increase. And I think, just think about the number of devices in the organizations that we all work in, or even in our own households. Now, Cisco estimates that there will be 28.5 billion network devices by 2022. Now remember, 2022 is no longer way out there in the future. That's next year. So annual audits and emerging regulations, like Ali was just talking about, and some that we have here in Europe, like GDPR or CCPA, and there's others based on whatever industry that you are in, or vertical, the organizations find themselves in. Here in Germany, where I live, just think about the automotive industry, all the new regulations on cars, all these regulations and standards, they're just becoming more and more stringent. And as we've seen from recent breaches, the cost of GDPR violations are extremely, extremely high. So you have threats, breaches, disruptions, all of these things have really become a part of business as we know it. And it's estimated that the average cost of a data breach is right around $4 million. And this continues to rise year over year. Now, one of the largest and most impactful threats is ransomware. So let's jump to the next slide, please. Ransomware continues to become more and more rampant as it's becoming easier to deploy. There's all kinds of automated tools that you can utilize to deploy ransomware. And organizations are paying out large sums of money. Now, it's making it more interesting for these criminal organizations because of this automation of ransomware, but also because in the early days of ransomware, I remember some of the large ransoms being maybe at $100,000, maybe, right? Some of them were like $300, right? And then you see them growing up to these very large amounts. Well, today we're actually talking about $70 million in some very public attacks. And I've even personally seen ransoms up to $100 million. So obviously criminal organizations are taking note of this and looking at it. Now, I have a list here of what some attackers might do when they want to roll out ransomware within an organization. First, what they're going to do is they're going to scan the environment and look for different types of vulnerabilities and discover these vulnerabilities in your network. And what they do then is they'll start to push out attacks like phishing attacks, or they'll exploit some of these known vulnerabilities like unpatched assets, which we see time and time again, that hacks will happen on systems that have not been patched in years. And even though they haven't been patched, these are vulnerabilities on these devices that have been remediated by the OEM years ago, right? So we need to keep up with that, and I'll get into that in a minute. Now, then they'll move laterally throughout the organization's vulnerable systems because they've started to determine where these systems are. And once they've determined which systems, then they start to figure out where the critical data is sitting, right? They want to find that critical data so that they can encrypt it, or do something that I've been seeing lately is not only have they been encrypting data, but we're also seeing bad actors exfiltrating sensitive data, right, that they discover. So it used to be kind of two separate games where, or two separate situations where there's either ransomware of decrypting data, or you have bad actors exfiltrating data. Now we're seeing both. A lot of times this is kind of like, you could see it almost as an insurance policy, right? You pay the ransom, and they give you the key back, right? And they have, the sensitive data. They can actually turn it around and resell that sensitive data as a second payday, if you will, right? And so if you go to the next slide, I made a quick little list here of how we want to prepare for these type of attacks. And really, it's all about hygiene. And organizations should first establish this continuous visibility into endpoints. And this really includes knowing what applications are running, knowing who's on the applications, if these applications should even be on the device, and then also having visibility into other user activity on them. Now, also, organizations need to remove these vulnerabilities I was talking about. There's assets there's these vulnerabilities on these assets that should be patched, should be updated. So many attacks come from devices that have not been configured correctly, websites that have not been configured correctly. These components are the cause, or the ability, the door, if you will, to most attacks. And we also need to be proactively hunting certain IOCs, or indicators of compromise, that are evidence in the environment of an attack. Because when we can find these IOCs within the environment, then we can stop them before they actually develop into a further attack. Okay, so next slide, please. As you see now, as we've talked about these threats, breaches, disruptions like ransomware, these things have truly become a part of business as we know it. And moreover, keep in mind that IT teams still have to drive innovation. We're still responsible for accelerating time to market for the business stakeholders. So these teams have to deal with all these breaches and disruptions, and they still have a job to do, right? So let's look into kind of the environment that they're working in. Next slide, please. What we find is that when it comes to the endpoint, this complexity has given way to what we refer to as the endpoint challenge. Now, IT teams are really struggling today to do two things: to manage and secure the endpoint. And for starters, we've taken this through the years as best of breed approach, with teams that on average have about 20 different tools. Now, I've seen some organizations that have up to 70 different tools within just their security operations, right? So while the best of breed approach or mentality is not necessarily a bad thing, it's not necessarily a problem, we've just seen this approach really give way to a new set of challenges. And for me, the biggest challenge, I think, and one of the main challenges that organizations are running into is visibility, right? So when every tool that you have in your environment is visibility into different endpoints at different frequencies on different parts of your network, knowing what assets you actually have, and then on top of that, knowing the health of those assets, I mean, it becomes nearly impossible. So we've actually found that most organizations have or will underestimate their asset inventory by somewhere between 12 and 20%. I've even seen some as high as 50%, which is scary to not know what's actually on your or within your environment. So when IT operations and security teams then are working from these different sets of data, if you will, or they have these competing views of their environment, you start to see friction forming between these different teams. And organizational silos will start to really harden, right? These silos already exist today. It's one of my personal goals to knock down all these silos, to have these teams working together. And I'll get into how we can do that. Now, as a result of these silos being hardened, so many critical IT processes, like what you need to fight off ransomware, like vulnerability scanning and patching, these processes really start to break down. Now, it's been found here at Tanium with working with our customers that with just patching alone, if we just look at patching, teams are losing up to 12 days in just coordinating workflows across teams. That means just getting the process and the workflow down to patch systems is losing organizations 12 days. Now, when this type of slowing down starts to happen within your environment, your organization's going to lose agility and you're going to be exposed to costly risk because there's going to be devices that are vulnerable that need to be patched that are not getting patched because of this slowdown. And despite all the tool sets that are out there, especially in these best of breed approaches, we still are seeing this time to resolution continue to grow year after year. So next slide, please. So to overcome this endpoints challenge, and hit it one more time for me, organizations will need to take a more unified approach to their endpoint management. Tanium was built with this in mind, okay? Tanium lives on the endpoint where you use and create data, and it allows you to deliver unparalleled visibility and control at scale. So your teams quickly gather current data directly from the endpoint and enrich existing processes. Or if you're utilizing SIM or SOAR technologies, you can enrich these. You can enrich databases. You can enrich ticketing systems, all kinds of different systems so that you can make smart decisions quickly. And once you've determined your course of action, your team can utilize Tanium to pivot from determining that course of action to actually taking action and then doing it across hundreds of thousands of servers and endpoints in seconds, all on a single platform. And I'll get into what that looks like here in a moment. So next slide, please. Now this slide is a little bit busy, and I'm going to leave it up to talk to several components in this slide. So at Tanium, as you can see, we've platformed the endpoint, allowing organizations to really unify endpoint security and management into one single console. You have IT operations, compliance, and security teams that can now collaborate with confidence because they know that they're working from the same set of data. There's no more competing views, if you will, of the organization. Now, Tanium then powers these key IT processes that I just mentioned, like asset management, patch management, compliance scanning, what else? Endpoint detection and response, just to name a few. And because we maintain a single agent platform, we can then streamline workflows across teams and processes. So by doing this, ultimately, we are going to be mitigating risk because we're ensuring your endpoints are up and running. And in the unfortunate event of an outage, right, we'll help you immediately move to remediation. And let me quickly go through our solution offerings here in further detail, right? So if you look over to the right-hand side, you'll see risk and security. But let's talk about risk first. The first step in securing and running your IT environment is knowing what's on it, right? So understanding what's in your IT environment. And most organizations today cannot answer that. I've asked hundreds of CISOs from multiple different organizations, Fortune 100 organizations, some of the largest organizations that you can think of, and asked them, how many endpoints do you have in your organization? And I've had wild answers from, with huge gaps, like 100,000 endpoints to maybe 150,000 endpoints. I'm not sure. That's a big gap. And so with this in mind, we've built our risk solution. Now, risk will help you manage your asset, monitor their health, and then scan for hardware and software vulnerabilities, and then ensure that the data and configuration is compliant, right? On top of this, we have our IT operations part of the platform. And because you're on this unified platform, you can easily pass risk information and results that we just talked about over to your operations team for remediation, right? So you find some gaps, you say, hey, ops guys, let's fix this. Let's look into these issues. And this helps the op teams maintain hygiene and remediate risk. And that's why we've built our operations suite. And with our operations suite, you can also discover and manage assets and distribute software and patches and do all of that in one continuous workflow across your entire network. Now, because you're on this common platform, security teams can then systematically rescan to ensure that any gaps that have been found have been addressed. And if any others come up, then we can address those because we're constantly working together. So I have a couple of great little stories from our customers as examples. There's a financial services company that we work with. And at one point, they had spent up to 8 months getting Microsoft Office deployed. And within that 8 months, they were only able to roll it out to 30% of their machines. Okay, so it took them 8 months to get Microsoft Office on 30% of their machines. Now, after talking to Tanium and working with Tanium, we deployed Microsoft Office to 100% of their machines, and we did that in 3 hours, right? So instead of 8 months only getting to 30%, we took 3 hours to get to 100%, okay? Now, healthcare, there was a healthcare firm that we worked with that was showing a compliance rating of 64% when they did their audits, and we're looking at that, right? So upon deploying Tanium, we actually found out that they were at 39%. So think about that. They thought they were at 64%, they're actually at 39%, right? Big gap in that visibility. And now they utilize Tanium regularly, and they maintain, right? At any given time, they maintain a greater than 95% patch compliance. So that means the next time they have an audit or have any need to look at, how compliant they are in their patching, they already know because they know exactly where they are on a day-to-day basis. Another organization that we work with deploys patches at the first pass success rate. So that means whenever they push out a path, whenever they deploy out a patch, that first patch that they send out has a success rate of 99%. And on top of that, they're also able to install antivirus software to all the company's 20,000 machines. And they did that in 4 days. So these are examples of the speed and the power of Tanium. Now, lastly, there's security. And as a security guy myself, I hate to admit it, but there's always a chance that something's going to get through your defenses. It's just the way that the world is today. Now, Tanium's security solution has been built to help security teams hunt because the visibility that we have now, investigate because we can pull data right away and get great information, and then prioritize risk across the entire environment. And then additionally, the security and ops teams can start to work together, as I mentioned before, to scan, remediate, and rescan for risk. So this just becomes a constant visibility within the environment. So next slide, please. So to really wrap this all up, Tanium wants to help you align your IT organizations for better outcomes. And we will do that by offering a single source of truth for endpoint management and security. Let's knock down the silos in our organization. Let's work better together. Let's work from the same set of data in real time. And a platform like this is going to drive collaboration and trust in your organization. And these two things are the tenets of any successful and powerful team. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I hope that any questions that come up that we can get those answered for you. Thank you very much. Darren, back to you.
Hey, Zach, thank you for that. Zach, you told me you were new to Tanium. You're not really. You've got 10 years experience. Now I understand. Yeah, I really do. But listen, thanks for the great insight into what is the reality of ransomware for every business out there. I think that came through. I love the endpoint challenge, the common challenges we see. But listen, there are a couple of questions here, and I want to just be quite specific. When it comes to ransomware, how would Tanium help?
Well, first of all, Tanium is going to give you that visibility that you're going to need to be able to see where those vulnerable devices are in your environment and what needs to be done to those vulnerable devices so that they are not vulnerable for these type of attacks. It's pretty simple, actually. When I first came across Tanium a good 10 years ago, I knew about ransomware and some of the things that were going on, I thought, oh, well, great. Now we have the visibility. Now we can do something about it, and I don't have to worry about ransomware anymore. Well, that was very naive of me, right? Because ransomware has just continued to grow and grow because there hasn't been enough of an investment in these simple things. It's simple hygiene that will keep you out of ransomware's way.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I love the simplicity, Zach. In terms of, I guess time to market and getting moving quickly, can Tanium integrate with other platforms?
Absolutely. So in my background, I've utilized Tanium in multiple different organizations. I've even built lab environments just to showcase to customers how easy the integration from Tanium is to other platforms. As an example, I worked very closely with a large SIM provider, right? Security event or incident event management provider, and was able to constantly talk to customers about Tanium because as a SIM or a source solution, you want to get the best data in, and Tanium really provides that best data, provides it quickly, provides the truth. And so, yeah, it's a great component to any security operations team.
Great. Zach, listen, I want to say thank you for your sharing your experiences and your insight this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I'm going to move swiftly on, and I'd like to introduce our next session, which is Stevie Murphy interviewing our founder and our CEO, Orion Hindawi. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Stephen Murphy. I have the great pleasure of running EMEA for Orion and Tanium here in Europe. I've got a great affinity with the Middle East, having run the region for the last 25 years, I guess, for various companies like Oracle and Sun Microsystems and Hitachi. I'm delighted to be joined today by our founder and chief exec. It's Orion Hindawi. Hello, Orion. How are you?
Really good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm really great. Thanks very much. I'm really excited about this venture we've got with Exclusive and our partners here in the Middle East. It's a wonderfully fast-growing region for us. We've got opportunities in every industry, in every city across the region. It's really cool. I thought we'd maybe use the next kind of 15, 20 minutes, Orion, if I may, to a couple of things, really have a little bit of insight into you and why Tanium, and then maybe get to show our partners, our prospects, our customers, some of the products as well, perhaps, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely.
Cool. First question for you is, when you set up the company, what goals did you set out for Tanium?
Sure. So, we started Tanium having run a company called Big Fix before Tanium. And what we learned at Big Fix was that especially larger companies were having a really hard time even then, this is 14 years ago, figuring out all the things that they had that were kind of things with chips in them. So whether it was desktop, laptop, server, VMs, cloud, all this IoT and OT and all the fun things that we have that are generating data that are really necessary to drive the business in almost every big business. They were having a hard time even then figuring out what they had, where it was, and what it was doing, and how to fix it. And so we started Tanium around this idea that companies were going to be getting bigger and bigger, and that if we didn't solve this problem for them, that both security and operations and really the whole IT stack was going to fall apart. And if you fast forward 14 years from then, I think a lot of what we just described happened. So people got a lot bigger. They got a lot more things that are generating data, a lot more things connected to their networks, and managing them became really, really hard. And so Tanium really was started, and I think continues to revolve around this idea that if we can give you really clear vision on everything you've got, where it is, who's using it, what data's on it, what's wrong with it, maybe, and how to fix it, whether, again, that's a desktop or a laptop or a container sitting in a cloud environment, or maybe a process controller sitting in a factory, we should be able to get all that under one umbrella and give you clear visibility and control over it. And if we do that, that it can dramatically simplify a lot of the challenges in IT.
Incredible. It's a great story, isn't it? And have, 14 years later, has the goal of the company changed in any way or shape or form?
We're really blessed. We've got so many customers. If you look at, the majority of the Fortune 100 in the US, you look at a lot of these huge companies globally, and governments, and kind of the organizations that are really trying to handle huge scale. We serve most of them these days. And so, I think when you're a startup and you're small, you imagine what it will be like to have the responsibility. Today, I think we do have the responsibility with a lot of these very meaningful companies in the world. And I think, the company's changed in the sense that when we wake up in the morning and we think about what we're going to build, we're not thinking that maybe we'll have an impact, but instead we're realizing that in the United States, all 10 of the top 10 banks use Tanium. If you think about a lot of international markets, the same trend is occurring. And I think it gives a lot of responsibility, but it's also a lot of fun in the sense that we get to be at the cutting edge, and I think help companies when we think about things like ransomware, when you think about things like compliance, when we think about things like patching. I think we help them do things they just didn't know how to do before in some cases.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, super relevant in every industry and every continent around the world. We talk to our customers about a platform that reaches into both operations and cybersecurity and CISO and CIO, and has effects with chief execs and CFOs and everybody in that kind of organization. Why should they, if you're a C member of a company, why should you be interested in a platform approach as opposed to, I've got this product in here that I'm already using, or, I've got this product over here that says, the Gartner Quadrant, it's a cool product to do this one thing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is nobody we know can afford to deploy 50 products very well. So we work with the biggest companies in the world, and if you look at some of them, they did, when we first get there, have 50 products. And even if they were spending billions of dollars on IT, they were unable to integrate and deploy all those products well. And I think, the reality of the situation is our industry loves to sell products to people, whether they need them or not, whether they know how to use them or not. And I think that in particular in security, but it's true in operations too, there's a lot of shelfware where people bought a big product, but they're using it for a small function, and just deploying it and maintaining it and training people on it and getting kind of the resources that are consumed by that product, swallowing them can be really, really cumbersome. And so, really what I would say is, when we look at our industry as a whole, IT, and you think about data, or you think about networking, or you think about workflow, companies like Splunk and maybe Palo Alto or Cisco or ServiceNow have successfully replatformed big swaths of the market. And I think a lot of our customers really appreciate the simplicity of having one thing that's pre-integrated, that really does scale, that has a support structure behind it so that you can deploy it well. And I think endpoint needs that. I think what we do needs that. And so, I think the reason that Tanium has grown to the scale that it has is a lot of our customers realize they just can't add the 51st and then the 52nd and the 53rd thing. They can't swallow the 50 they have, much less 3 or 4 more this year. And what they really want to have is from 50 down to 30, down to 20, down to 5, and hopefully eventually down to very few. And I do think a lot of our customers who use us correctly have gotten to that point.
We've got thousands, literally thousands of customers that consume that platform, either in the cloud or on premise or through one of our partners as a service. And you've met, literally hundreds of those thousands of customers. What's the most common theme you hear from the C-suite when they speak to you and they say, "Thank you, Orion, you're helping us out with here"? What's the most common thing?
A lot of people start with Tanium in very simple areas. So to give you an example, a lot of our customers have been through a software license management audit. And if you don't know how many computers you have and you don't know what they're running, that becomes a very difficult conversation because the vendor knows that you don't know the answer to the basic question, which is, what am I using?
Yeah.
And often the result is very unfair in the vendor's favor because they can just declare that you're using 7 trillion copies of their software and you can't really fight that. If you have Tanium, you can absolutely fight that. You know exactly what you have, so you can answer that question. We have a lot of our customers who start with us on patch management, which, you know, it's 2021. We shouldn't be talking about patch management. It should be a solved problem. But the reality is both a lot of the operations issues and the security breaches that are succeeding today are being caused by the fact that customers have not solved this problem. And so if we give them a way to solve it, it's hugely transformative for them. We've got a lot of our customers who have compliance issues. They have a regulator, or maybe they have an internal audit function or a board who really wants to know, are we compliant with the standards we set? And a lot of companies to this day, before Tanium gets there, can't answer those questions with confidence. And that's a very painful thing not to be able to answer. And so, you know, I think a lot of our customers want to skip a step and begin with automation and really exciting stuff that we do with a lot of our customers. You know, hunting for 0-day vulnerabilities or being able to go and look at, you know, Active Directory and finding vectors of attack. But those are all things we can do. But, you know, when we start with customers, often we're starting with them with very simple things that everybody knows they have to do well, but that they can't do well because the tools they have are fragmented and broken and don't scale very well. And we come in and we clean that up and give them a tool that actually works, that works out of the box, that answers the questions that they actually have to answer, whether it's for a software license management audit or for, you know, a patch management audit or for compliance or whatever it is. Fix those data gaps, and then we can get to the more exciting stuff. And by the way, look, Tanium has 15 modules, and some of them do absolutely incredible things. But I'll just tell you, you know, where we usually start with people is let's close the doors and windows. We don't need to worry about the skylights and the Russians coming in through the skylights, hacking you with 0-day vulnerabilities and all these really exciting things, because the lowest hanging fruit is actually just solving the simple problems that, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people have almost given up on the ability to solve because they've been trying for so long and the tools have failed them for so long that sometimes they don't believe it's possible. And just to give you an example, we have a customer recently, and I was on the phone with them, and they were explaining to me how prior to Tanium, they'd never actually been able to answer who was actually connecting to services outside of their company. So you have tools like Salesforce, and you have all these other SaaS tools, and Dropbox and whatever, and they just wanted to know who was connecting to these services. And they spent tons of money on network equipment, but it couldn't figure it out because of encryption. They spent tons of money on all these things. And finally with Tanium, they got an answer literally 2 hours after they deployed the system. And you could see it was like a relief for them because finally they could answer a question they'd been asked over and over again with an answer they trusted. And I know that sounds really simple, but those kind of situations, where do we have SolarWinds in our environment? Do we have Kaseya in our environment? Is Print Nightmare an issue for us? These should be simple questions, but it turns out that for a lot of people, they were not simple when they happened. And I think we can make them simple. And then we can solve the complicated stuff.
Really cool. We've got a lot of partners on here today. You mentioned some auditors there like PwC perhaps, or Ernst & Young, or Accenture, etc., Capgemini. And we've also got some great resale partners in there that can help deliver some of these services. And you mentioned we can kind of do this thing out of the box. Is it possible to have a quick 10-minute show of the product to let the audience see just how simple it is that we can affect some of these audit, compliance, operational security issues that they may have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, look, I'll share my screen here, and hopefully, you know, I can give you a 3-minute view or 5-minute view on what this thing is. So,
great.
Look, I mean, back to kind of basics. You look at Tanium and you think about what the problem set is. The problem set is I want to know what I have right now across my whole estate. And Tanium gives you a really easy way to do that. You can actually type questions in English and get answers back in seconds. So I've got a 1,000-seat environment here. And what's novel about Tanium is when I ask a question, instead of going to a database that collected that data a week or a month ago, I'm actually going out to the endpoints in real time and gathering the data, and you can see 100% of the data came back in about 15 seconds. And again, what's novel is not what was there before, but what's there right now. So, if I want to ask, for all the installed applications and computers with the Windows operating systems, right, I can type that in. And again, what's novel is not data that came back hours or days or weeks ago, data that comes back seconds ago because I asked the question. And you can imagine a situation where Microsoft comes in and says, I want to know what you're using. I mean, for the first time, our customers can actually answer that with authority. And if it changes because, something gets uninstalled, they know that within seconds. And so that's the basic capability, being able to reach out to even scales of millions of assets. And so, you look at those big banks, some of them have hundreds of thousands or millions of devices. Being able to ask these questions at the same speed and pivot around the environment and gather data in seconds has transformed these people. And so then with that capability, we've built a bunch of modules that essentially, as I mentioned, replace point solution use cases that people used to have products for. And I can't overemphasize, I mean, if you've got 20 or 30 different tools that are sitting on every endpoint doing basically the same stuff with a little bit of variation, the amount of resources that you're dedicating to management sometimes might be the biggest problem that you've got in your environment. And so cleaning all that out and giving you things like asset management data, where I can actually give you visibility on the assets you have, be able to see data that's seconds old that's coming back from the environment, put that into tools like ServiceNow so that they're up to date, or BMC or others, whether it's asset data or software data or user data or an entitlement data or vulnerability data, enriching those things so that there's 99.9% accurate data there instead of 85% accurate data, which is what a lot of people are used to in their CMDBs. Or potentially going and getting you compliance data. And so, just to make a point here, a lot of our customers historically have had a point solution for compliance. And the question is why? I mean, if you think about compliance, and you think about what you're doing there, you're going and taking lots and lots of devices and assessing them and seeing whether they've got problems or not and bringing that data back. And Tanium can do that across every device that you have and do that in seconds and give you truly comprehensive, accurate data. So, for the first time, being able to drill in on that, being able to see the devices, being able to then get asset data about those devices all in one platform, and doing that in seconds, not in days or weeks, and doing it way less expensively than a point solution. You think about things like patch management. Now, there are a lot of things that the system does, but we're in 2021, and as I mentioned, we shouldn't be talking about patch management anymore. This should be a solved problem. But the truth is, most big companies are way behind on their patches. And you're using a tool like an SCCM or a Big Fix, and the challenge is those tools are really hard to make work, to the point where a lot of people, when we first get there, are 60 or 70% patched. And Tanium allows you to actually go and install the patches when you click the button and do all the fun things you're used to doing, like set all these policies. But what's really key about Tanium is when you click the button to go, it works. And I know that sounds funny, but if you actually go talk to the people who are pressing the buttons in SCCM today and ask them about patching, they're going to tell you they push the button over and over again, and then they have to go back a week later and they push it again and then again, and eventually they get to 90%. And that's not how computers are supposed to work. So, we've got the ability to, I think, clean up a lot of these very annoying, very slow, cumbersome, expensive problems using one platform that allows you to do it in one place and integrates all these different processes into one workflow so that you don't have to have 50 different tools and 50 different workflows and 50 different integrations and all these kind of big data problems that I think a lot of companies are just fed up with. So, very high level, that's what we do.
It's very cool indeed, isn't it? Really cool. Really, thank you very much for that. I'm going to pass back to Darren now, who's going to take this over. But as you can see why all of these companies are coming to Tanium for their threat hunting or their risk and compliance or asset pack management or sensitive data analysis. That's why people are coming in from every industry vertical, from every continent, from every big city across the world. We're here with our partners to be able to roll out this stuff very, very quickly, at pace and at scale, in every place that we come to. Over to you, Darren. Thank you very much. And thanks, Orion.
You bet. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Stephen Murphy. I have the great pleasure.
Wow, somebody keep that man quiet. Stevie, good morning.
Good morning. This is the real me this time. Good morning, Darren. How are you?
I'm very well. Listen, Stevie, that was quite fantastic. That was what an amazing insight from Orion. We got a for him to share, a CEO that can share the company strategy and do a hands-on demo all in 20 minutes and do it with real simplicity. I love close the doors and the windows. Forget about the Russians coming through the skylight. Let's close the doors and the windows and really keep it simple. Listen, I'm sure everybody took a lot from what Orion talked about there. And Stevie, we've got some time with you. So I want to, in the same way that you asked Orion, what his goals were for Tanium, with a specific focus on the Middle East region, what are your goals and aspirations for this region that you know so well?
Well, Darren, thanks for the question, and delighted to be here. And that video that we just showed there of Orion, the chief executive in that demo, we've got everybody. The simplicity of this tool, this platform that we sell, is there for everyone to see. And we scale from, a few hundred endpoints to a few million endpoints with immediacy. It's such a simple tool, and it works really well. So as I said, I've got the great pleasure of running the region. It goes from Iceland in the top to South Africa in the bottom, and from the UK all the way through to Pakistan. It's one of the most amazing regions in the world, and none so as great as the Middle East region. My goal for the region is pretty simple. Across Europe, we are like trebling in size really every quarter, every 6 months, definitely. And what I'm here to do is to make sure that I've got the right support in place for every CIO, every CISO, and every C member across this whole region, be it the KSA or UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, or Bahrain. We're going to be there to support you. We're investing heavily in the region, in sales and pre-sales, all of our partners, all of our technical ability, all of the delivery ability that we enjoy in France and Germany, in the UK, and all over the US, etc. We have those capabilities here and now in the region. So I want to make sure that I'm there to support everybody in there. We've got great relevance in this region. As I said, I've got the capabilities there now to support everyone, be they in government or utilities and energy, banking or FSI or transport and logistics. We're actually here to deliver the kind of 5 big things that we're talking about: risk and compliance, client management, asset discovery and patching, threat hunting, or sensitive data management. So my job is to manage the scale that's coming to us and our partners, make sure that we've got the right IP and the delivery capabilities in the region, and support every CIO and CISO going across every industry vertical.
Thanks for that, Stevie. One thing that struck me is whether it was Ali, whether it was Zach, or even Orion, we talk about the simplicity and the power of Tanium. I think that's come across loud. What is your message to both customers and partners out there who are on the webinar for the Middle East region? What's the next call to action? How can we help them?
I and we at Tanium have great empathy about the challenges facing the C-suite and companies out there. The enormous explosion of endpoints before we even get to the Internet of Things, but people working from home, from Starbucks, from the cafe, from their bedrooms, or from wherever they want to be. The number of acquisitions and mergers are happening, and nobody has a clue where those endpoints are. And that represents compliance and risk. It represents management problems and huge cost escalations and so on and so forth. All of the things we've been mentioning today. We've got huge empathy for them because we've got hundreds of thousands of customers that deal with this. We're dealing with hundreds of millions of endpoints that we manage for our customers and clients around the world. So we know what we're doing here, and as I said, we've got great empathy and experience in being able to handle that. So my suggestion is just come and pick up the phone, give us a call, right? We've got representation for Tanium in the region. We've got amazing partners with Exclusive and through Exclusive, and some great global systems integrators. We heard PwC, for instance, in there as well. Or you pick up the phone and phone me at steve.murphy, or pick up, email me at steve.murphy@tanium.com. We will gladly come in, show you the software, let you see how it works, demonstrate how easy it is for us to fix some of these challenges. Give us a call.
Thank you, Stevie. Thank you. And I'd urge everybody, please, questions, telephone numbers, whatever you want, engage with us, and use the Q&A this morning to engage with the team and Stevie and everybody you've heard. Thank you, Stevie.
Thanks, Darren.
Let me move on to the last but by no means least. What a great story from one of our most mature and experienced partners across EMEA. Let me pass on to Scott and Joe from Endpoint X.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Scott Lowe, and I'm the co-founder of Endpoint X. We are officially the first global accredited Tanium partner, and we offer boutique professional services around the Tanium platform. But previous to this, I spent 25 years working in tech infrastructure for multiple, global financial services companies such as Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, and most recently Barclays. And the Tanium team asked me if I could come here today to share a brief story of the role I played and the team played in deploying Tanium at Barclays. And then Joe is going to share some stories around the successes we've had with some of our current customers at Endpoint X, and hopefully demonstrate the value they're getting. The team and I have previously worked together at Bank of America and some of us at Barclays, where we engineered and ran possibly two of the world's biggest Tanium deployments with between 250 and 350,000 endpoints. So hopefully our story helps. So initially at Barclays, they wanted to use Tanium to identify, track, and stop lateral movement across their network. So it was definitely a cybersecurity play at first to help protect them against malicious attacks. That includes using Tanium signals, which is what Ali mentioned earlier. Those signals look for specific malicious behavior and alert into the scene. But we could definitely see value in having the ability to see across both Windows and Unix endpoints all in one portal. That's quite unique. And this helped to bring the cybersecurity and technology teams closer together. So it was less of an argument about you need to patch these things and we think we've patched the right machines. It brought those two teams together and made sure they weren't arguing about the data. When we tried to deploy, I'd seen Tanium at Bank of America. I'd seen how powerful it was, but some people just don't believe it. It's like a real wow moment when somebody shows you how you can ask a question across thousands, hundreds of thousands of machines and get an answer in 30 seconds. People just don't believe it. And it's mainly because previous technology could take 3 or 4 weeks to do that, and often the data was stale as soon as you'd received it. So that added to kind of the culture and resistance from some of the infrastructure teams who wanted to use the tools they'd used for years, even though some of them weren't working very well and involved lots of manual effort. And I think, to be honest, some of them were a bit nervous that Tanium was going to shine a light on some of the issues that existed. At the time, the bank's view right from the top was you can't protect what you don't know about. And this resonates today with all of our customers. Tanium quickly gave them that visibility they needed. And I think for our customers today, often CIOs are being told everything's fine, either by their internal teams or by third-party companies that they may pay to provide services like patching or vulnerability management. And Tanium continues to really quickly lift the lid on this, showing the real kind of truth about what's happening, what patches are missing, what vulnerabilities are missing. And I think another quick one is that a lot of people we see today are using Tanium to give a group view, across multiple subsidiaries. Often the subsidiaries have their own tools and they have their own data, but the Tanium's able to give a view across the whole group, which is great from a risk perspective. As you can imagine, with Barclays being a bank, security was incredibly important, paramount to their operations. And we used all of Tanium's inbuilt RBAC controls, multi-factor authentication, and concepts of 4 eyes approval to make sure that it was secure by design and by operation. And that's something that, having managed 30 or 40 different types of systems management tools, endpoint management tools, not all of them have, and that means that when it's operating, you have a lot more confidence. Deploying the agent was quick and only really delayed by overly strict kind of testing at Barclays that was mandated by the business. Tanium supports almost all operating systems. There's a few old ones it doesn't like XP and Windows 2000, but everything else is supported. And I suppose Tanium was very quickly the system of choice for many things. So to give you some examples, firstly, it was used to monitor for and alert on malicious behavior and in real time, the key thing there. And that helped the security response teams see what was happening. It also provided them forensic evidence to follow up and find out how it happened. It enabled them to quarantine suspicious endpoints so they couldn't get any further in the network or damage anything else. And they also sent all of the data. Zach talked earlier about integrations into other platforms. At Barclays, they sent the data into Splunk and their SIEM. So they, I think by the end of the first year, they've reduced the time of red team exercises, spotting a red team exercise, to under 10 minutes. So on the cybersecurity side, the use case was pretty clear. In IT, the use cases were endless. They used it for looking for unauthorized software, upgrading browsers, the Chrome, Internet Explorer. They used it to look for missing patches, to look for vulnerabilities. They used it to deal with a WannaCry outbreak, to ensure all of the machines were patched or turned off if they were unable to be patched. So that was key. And it also monitored for those machines being turned back on again. So if they were turned back on again with a vulnerable machine to WannaCry, it would immediately alert the cybersecurity teams. They used it to look for malicious hashes of files and or passwords. They checked who had local admin rights. I mean, the list of use cases is endless. And then what they did around integrations, used Tanium's discovery capabilities and all of its asset data to send to ServiceNow all of the asset data to enrich the CMDB, and often finding assets that other tools missed. Sent all the software information into Flexera, which saved, I think, about 12 months by not having to roll out Flexera agents. And then they used it to patch servers, improving patch rates from sort of 75% to over 95%. And the key thing on patching was that Tanium was able to do pre-patching and post-patching verification checks, which is really, really helpful. So use cases are almost limited, but I think its greatest success, and I always laugh at this, it's quite boring, but it became the trusted source of data around the bank, used by operational teams, used by auditors and data scientists. It was the best view of endpoint data. So in summary, it was, and I believe continues to be, from my contacts at the bank, a great success for them. And myself, Joe, and the rest of our team at Endpoint X loved Tanium so much, we left and set up Endpoint X. So it tells you the confidence we've had in the platform. So I'm a little bit over time. I'm now going to pass over to Joe Michael, who is going to talk to you very quickly about how our customers are using Tanium to improve their IT hygiene. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Scott. So yeah, fast forward a little bit from seeing Tanium work at Bank of America and Barclays, and roll off, if you could just roll the slide on one. Just to the next slide, if that's possible. Yeah, perfect. So the success that we've really had as a company is, taking that experience from some of the biggest banks in the world and going to customers and saying, those IT things that you look at, I think Orion mentioned, let's stop thinking them as just IT problems. Let's start thinking them as preventative security problems. Let's think about, your asset registry. Let's think about your third-party patching. Let's think about your OS patching, your configuration and your vulnerability management. Let's stop just thinking about them as IT issues on their own on a little island, and let's think about how we can bring them together, as a preventative security sort of hygiene program. So what we've done is gone to our customers and said, hey, why don't you think about building all of these things and letting us help you with those, and let's do them all in Tanium, because Tanium can do these things across the whole spectrum without ever needing to leave a single UI. So we've had real success with this with our customers. We've got quite a few customers who are using this. We even have one customer who bought Tanium and brought us along to act as a partner, and then ended up going to another organization and bringing this idea with them that we've also delivered there. So this idea that we'll find your assets, know 100% of what's on your network, bring it under management, make sure that it's well patched and the software is well deployed, make sure policies are enforced and we're measuring that those policies are exactly where we want them to be, and then manage both aged and future vulnerabilities as they come out, and provide all that as a service. So we would just report back in terms of BI to those companies and say, you're good. And in Orion's lingo, that would be closing the doors, closing the windows. We both do sort of bringing people up to speed, but also making sure that they're, automatically covered as we go forward as well. So yeah, I appreciate we've run over time a little bit, so I won't go into too much detail. And yeah, thanks. And I'll hand back to Darren.
Scott, Joe, what a great insight, quite a brilliant insight, almost unique, customer and partner perspective. So thanks for that, guys. Listen, I like the managed hygiene approach. Just want to ask a couple of questions on that, close the doors and windows, some real parallels with what we've said. What's the biggest problem you're helping customers overcome with this approach?
Yeah, sure. I can answer that. Thank you. So the first, there's kind of two really that we see as the biggest problems. I think, we've talked about this a few times throughout the hour. I think the biggest one is just visibility, right? Knowing that you know everything that's on your network, not most of what's on your network, everything. Because the 1% that you can't see is the 1% that people are going to use to infiltrate and own your network. So you really have to have that complete visibility, and Tanium's very good at helping that. And then the second one is real confidence in the state of your environment. There's a difference between sort of pushing a policy and hope it sticks versus really knowing that that policy is enforced. And similarly with patching, I think Orion mentioned that hitting the button a few times until it hits 90%. With Tanium, you can be really, really confident that you are at 100% patch, that you are at 100% good hygiene. And I think it's that confidence between the actions you take and knowing that they've been actually taken that really allows us to solve those two problems.
Joe, Scott, listen, thank you for sharing your insight and your experience today. I think throughout, whether it's you guys, I think there's been a real common theme about the power and simplicity of Tanium. So thank you, guys. And listen, thank you to all our speakers this morning. Thank you to Ali, Scott, Joe from our strategic partners, and thanks to Steve, Orion, and Zach from Tanium. I want to now pass across to Grant Taylor, who's going to summarize and conclude today. So Grant, let me pass across to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks to all of the presenters today. It's been really interesting. I hope that, like me, you can see the huge opportunity that Tanium brings to us all in the Middle East. And in reality, it's a solution that offers true visibility. And I think we don't really can't protect what we can't see, right? And I think that's time and time again we hear this message, but here is something that actually to help us with that. In the past week, we've seen a large firewall vendor announce it had lost data on half a million VPN customers. Again, the reason for that was that those VPNs hadn't been patched. So all of this process and all of this stuff helps us to understand what's on a network, keep it up to date, manage it, and all doing that under a single pane of glass, right? And if we're truly honest with ourselves in the Middle East, one of our biggest challenges is having enough people to manage the solutions that we're working with. But it's not just that. We've got people on the ground in the Middle East to support you. So if you could move on one, Rolf. We have Rami Mashal, who is based in our Saudi office, but is our Tanium sales director for the Middle East. He is absolutely chomping at the bit to come and talk to you about Tanium, to get you up and running with POCs and trials, to talk to you about partnerships. He can cover the full gambit. He's got a team behind him. He's backed up by 6 or 7 people across the Middle East have already been trained on Tanium in our channel teams across and situated in those different countries. So it really isn't just here's a presentation, we're going to leave you alone. This is, here's a presentation, here's a taster. Now we want to take you on a journey that leads you down that Tanium route. And we're really looking forward to working with you guys. So last and not least from me is the winners of the staycation. I think what we'll do is we're going to send you an email. We've got your email addresses. And the winners are Ahmed Bekit, Ali Al-Khamis, and Tariq Saeed. So again, no need to do anything yet. We'll email you. We'll be in touch to talk about the staycation winners. But from me, heartfelt thank you for everybody that came and listened. And this is just the start of the journey from us and Tanium. Thank you.